I'm Roburta Burroughs, Senior Service Account Manager at NASDAQ. I'll be your moderator for this panel. I would like to thank, first of all, Change Catalyst for putting on this Tech Inclusion Conference. I want to thank Melinda, Wayne, and their team for having this day for us. Let's really give them a quick round of applause so far. Because we have a limited amount of time, I'm going to do some introductions of our panelists here, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. So, right next to me, I have Alice Armitage. And Alice Armitage is an associate professor at UC Hastings College of Law and director of Startup Legal Garage at UC Hastings, which is a year-long academic class that connects law students with leading attorneys to provide corporate and intellectual property work to early-stage startup companies. She is also engaged in research for the Institute of Innovation Law on legal and other issues facing startup companies. More recently, Alice was founder and CEO of mobile safety app startup and has provided consulting services to other startup companies. Professor Armitage is a graduate of Yale Law School, practiced law in Washington, D.C., and was the founder and CEO of a mobile safety app startup, as mentioned. Next to Alice, we have Gloria Ware. So Gloria is the principal and also part of the inclusion department at Jumpstart, Inc. You probably have heard of Jumpstart. Gloria leads the development and implementation of Jumpstart's inclusive entrepreneurship strategy in Northeast Ohio and the U.S. throughout the Jumpstart Entrepreneurial Network. Gloria develops strategic relationships, partnerships, and programs that will continuously leverage the collective human capital of the region to develop and fund the next generation of high-growth and high-tech entrepreneur and job creators. Over the past year, she has partnered with the Jumpstart Solutions Group on 3 major projects to promote and create inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems across the U.S. Most recently, in collaboration with Jumpstart CEO Ray Leach and the National Venture Capital Association's Diversity Task Force, Gloria played a role in development and advocacy for a diversity pledge that was announced last month at the 2015 White House Demo Day. You all may have heard of that. I know some of the people have actually participated in that, signed by 45 organizations. Prior to Jumpstart, Gloria served in a number of progressive banking positions. She's been active in providing advisory service to hundreds of small businesses and minority and women-owned startups. She holds an BS in International Business Administration from The Ohio State University. She sits on numerous boards that foster business growth and development, and she is also a proud mother of a recent college graduate, Michael, who is working for a minority-owned engineering business. Yes, congratulations on that one.
Building the pipeline.
Yes.
Next we have Anarghya Vardhana. She's from Rothenberg Ventures. She's a San Francisco-based investor and product leader. She attended Stanford University, where she wrote a thesis on the political economy of cell phones in developing countries. Afterwards, she spent 4 years focusing on UI, UX, and leading product teams at Google and other startups, both in Silicon Valley and in Nairobi. Her experience ranges both in the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. She is currently, as I mentioned, an investor at Rothenberg Ventures and has been a VC for the past year and a half. She invests in all things tech, but has a particular focus on health tech, ed tech, and virtual reality. She is excited about VR affecting every industry, and especially about it in being an opportunity for inclusion in both the building and using of the platform. She helps facilitates the River Accelerator at Rothenberg Ventures. And last but definitely not least, we have Carmen Rojas, who is the CEO of the Workers Lab. Carmen Rojas knows the reality of the American dream. Her parents both immigrated to San Francisco from South America in the late 1960s and slowly worked their way up the ladder. Working her way through school, she earned a PhD, and being a longtime social justice advocate, she knows the rarity of the American dream and how difficult conditions can be for low-wage workers. Over the past 15 years, Rojas has dedicated herself to advocate for workers' rights. She has championed a wide range of social justice issues, including community development and racial inclusion. Today, Carmen is the founder and CEO of the Workers Lab, an accelerator with an end goal of improving conditions for low-wage workers. Under her leadership, the Workers Lab has funded entrepreneurs, community organizers, technologists who are creating replicable and revenue-generating solutions that improve conditions for workers in low-paying jobs. Earlier in her career, Carmen was the Director of Strategic Programs at the Mitchell Kaport Foundation, worked with San Francisco Redevelopment Agency's Task Force on African American Out-Migration, and worked with the Social Equity Caucus, a program of urban habitat. Carmen holds a PhD in City and Regional Planning from the University of California, Berkeley, and was a Fulbright Scholar, actually, in 2007. These are our panelists. So I'm going to sit down because those lights are a bit hot. So let's start talking about some of the big challenges that you all see with entrepreneurs and business owners besides raising capital. So I'm going to ask that each of you give me your top one or two from your expertise in terms of the challenges, and then we'll discuss, because we want to focus on solutions here, we'll discuss what works best for those issues and why. So Alice?
I don't know. Can you all hear from this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah? Oh, okay. So I'm a professor of law. So obviously the things that I try to help startups with.
Here we go.
Okay. So I'm a professor of law. So obviously the things that I think are most important that startups need to really focus on, and I tried to help with, are legal needs. And every startup, even early stage startups, no, I think this, oh, okay. Early stage startups often don't realize that they need all of their basic corporate and transactional needs. They need a platform from which not only they can go and get investors, but which they can grow their revenue and grow their business. So I'm talking about not only forming your company as an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp, but also getting the contracts you need with consumers, employees, vendors, and eventually investors. And also some of what we called soft intellectual property needs, trademark, copyright, terms of service policy. Those are all things that no startup founder really wants to think about, but are really important. And we try to help everybody get that. And the services we provide in our projects are free. They're short term. It's a semester, 3 months, but they are for free. So that's how we're trying to meet and help the startup community move past those initial needs and grow their business and get investment.
Thank you. Gloria?
So from my experience in working with entrepreneurs, the biggest question that I get is, where can I find other people like me that can relate to my issues, that can help to make sure that I avoid some of the common problems that I've run up against, and that I know will connect me to the best resources that are available, because there are so many vendors and opportunities. Oftentimes they're very unsure of who they can trust. So the way that we've addressed that, and we'll talk about this later at Jumpstart, is providing them with connectivity to vetted, seasoned, experienced entrepreneurs or domain experts, such as attorneys, specifically attorneys that work with startups and early stage businesses, and helping the entrepreneurs to get the resources that they need from building and developing those relationships, and then being connected to the relationships within the mentors, and saving our entrepreneurs a lot of time, money, and helping them to avoid feelings of isolation. So looking forward to talking more about that.
Building a company is really, really hard work, and I think oftentimes with glamorous stories, the difficulty of it can get minimized. And building a company in Silicon Valley, if you are not already well connected here, is even harder. It's really, really challenging. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are brilliant, amazing ideas, amazing innovation in them, and a passion to build something, but they just don't know where to get started. And so I think a big question is they don't know what kind of people to ask to for money. They don't know, should I take that $20,000 check from that random person who wants to give me money? It sounds like good money. They just don't know where to get these questions answered. And I think oftentimes people don't know if they have access to investors. Can I talk to someone? Can I make a friendship with an investor and they can just talk to me and give me advice, but not have to judge me and say, oh, are they going to give me money? There's a lot of complication around that relationship. And the internet is great. It has a lot of information, but it can also be misguided misguiding and somewhat overwhelming when you're starting to think through everything from legal to relationships to who do I take money from, what terms should I do it on, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just having that resource of having maybe 1, 2, or 3 people who can advise you, who've seen it, who've done it before, who you know you can trust is really important.
For us, one of the things that I think is really reflected in this panel is the broad ecosystem that this universe encompasses, right? That there's the entrepreneur and then there's the investor, but then there's also the lawyer that can help you come up with a contract, or there's the technical assistance provider who can connect you with other investors or can help provide you a set of skills that you otherwise wouldn't have. And what I see specifically for entrepreneurs of color is that ecosystem is really, it doesn't exist, frankly, is that we're training a whole bunch of people in coding or in technical skills, but not thinking about the investor pipeline, how we are preparing investors of color, that we aren't preparing attorneys of color to actually act as part of this ecosystem, that we're not mirroring the existing ecosystem in full. And I feel like that's a humongous challenge. And so what I see people doing is sort of piecing things together and hoping that somebody who is some kind of a lawyer can help give some kind of advice, but not being able to give the full range of advice necessary to be a successful entrepreneur.
So what I hear, I have a loud voice, so just let me know if you can't hear me. So what I hear so far, talking about legal assistance, looking for people who look like yourself, trust, and actually developing that full ecosystem. I want to actually ask some of the people here in the audience, can you give me maybe a couple of other things that you as entrepreneurs or working with entrepreneurs that you think is important outside of the injection of capital, outside of raising money? Yes.
Recruiting.
Recruiting, okay.
That's another big network outlier.
Anyone else? Yes.
Building a board of advisors.
Building a board of advisors, okay. Anyone else in the audience before we go into results? No? All right. So, oh, yes.
Robust relationship with failure.
Robust relationship with what? Failure. Yes, that's true.
That's right.
There's a book called the Greatest F or something like that. It's about failure. Yes.
Contracts and legal advice.
Yep. Contracts and legal advice. Anyone else? Because we're not going to spend a long time on problems, so I'm trying to get them out of the way right now so we can focus on those solutions. Yes.
It seems like there's a lot of questions around growth.
Growth. Like, how do you grow your company after a certain series of injection of funding? Like, if you're at Series A, how do you get to Series B, et cetera, et cetera? If you're pre-seed, that sort of growth, or?
Social marketing, onboarding users, go to market.
Okay, so marketing, customer growth, that sort of thing. Okay. All right. So
I wonder if actual, like, am I working on the right problem and building the right company that can get funded is a question anyone has. Okay.
I'm sure. And since you actually injected that, why don't you talk a little bit about that, or what you've seen in terms of some of the solutions that we've talked about in terms of problems?
Specifically for the one I just talked about?
First, and then you can expand.
Yeah. Well, I believe really, really strongly that that your VC should offer much more than capital. I think you're building a lifelong relationship with the VC, and they should help you in any way to make you successful. So hiring is a really big problem, and we support our founders in doing that, whether it's through our own network, through hosting career fairs, or just happy hours where people can meet each other. And to specifically talk about, like, are you working on the right problem? Are you going to be able to raise additional venture money on this? I think first, like, the basic need is to really understand what a venture backable business is, which I think a lot of founders don't really know. There may even be a sentiment in that, I have an idea, I'm going to go raise money. And that's not necessarily true, and you may not necessarily be venture backed, or you may get a seed funding, but you may not be able to get money after that. So it's really important, I think it's really connected, to build your network and to find people who you trust, who you can talk to, and also look at what's happened in the past. What are companies that have been successful, and what are problems that you can solve that you can actually either grow out a user base if it's a consumer type of company, get enterprise clients to use you if it is an enterprise company, but really figure out what that problem is and know that you are solving it and that people are going to be interested in backing you to solve it. That doesn't mean mean that there are problems that you are solving that everyone's always going to get. There's going to be stuff that you have to bang your head against a wall and say, I'm doing the right thing, like please understand and give me money to do it. And that is part of the challenge of being a founder. But I think if you can get more voices around your table to really be that devil's advocate for you and ask the right questions, people you trust, a diverse group that can ask all the different types of questions, I think that'll really help you figure out and position yourself in the perfect way.
Okay, Carmen, I wanted to know from you too. Thank you, Anarghya. Just in terms of the specifics that we've talked about because of what Workers Labs does, and also too because you actually deal with the low-wage workers who wants to be the entrepreneur. So helping them build that ecosystem from a technical perspective. Could you talk a little bit about what has worked best?
So I'll just admit outright that we were really naive when we started. We started a year ago. We had a pool of money, and we're like, let's put it out there, and we're going to put out, $1 million in the first year to entrepreneurs who are solving problems facing low-wage workers in this country. We knew that the vast majority of those people were people of color and immigrants, and wanted to find an entrepreneur pool that reflected that. And unfortunately, we didn't. We had a really tough time. 6 months in, just talking to other people who ran accelerators, there was something beyond intentionality. There was this need to not only have capital and a program, but that we actually needed to rebuild the ecosystem, that we needed to have a lawyer on staff that could work with our entrepreneurs, that we needed to have a business advisor on staff to work with the entrepreneurs, that we needed to commit to not only giving each of our entrepreneurs $150,000, but that we needed to make sure that at the end of the 9 months that there was going to be somebody there to help them move their idea forward. And so I think our commitment is now, in large part because we're new and we're pretty small, is to actually doing the pivot and saying, this isn't only about what we think needs to happen, this actually needs to reflect the need in a broader field of social impact investing and social entrepreneurship. And so I think that we've really rebuilt within the Workers Lab through networks, through our own networks, that ecosystem that can help on-ramp entrepreneurs of color. And frankly, as a new investor that comes from philanthropy, is frankly just creating the pipeline and pathway for people of color to do my job, like inviting more people. We have open fellowships. We try to create as many jobs as possible at the Workers Lab, in large part because it's really exposure, right?
So Gloria, you've worked with hundreds of small businesses. You've been at Jumpstart for quite some time. Talk about some specific things that you've seen that have worked. And then Alice, I want to hear from you from a legal perspective in terms of what works and what doesn't.
So I would like to follow up on Carmen's conversation about the ecosystem approach, because we primarily started out as being technology, high growth technology based, venture backed type of a fund, and we were focused on a very narrow slice of our population, especially with this focus on technology. And we realized as we evolved, Jumpstart's been around for 10 years, that we needed to be more expansive in our thought process and think about creating ecosystems. So, we've developed relationships with various diverse professional associations, but not everyone is going to necessarily be excited about this work and being an entrepreneur. So we had to be creative and think about how can we make people create this ecosystem, create a culture that, so if I do have someone that's interested in being an entrepreneur, they don't feel so isolated, they don't feel so lonely. They have a whole community that understands what that means, that understands if they fail 2 or 3 times, that's okay. That's part of the process. That if they're asking for, some capital or you to support their crowdfunding campaign, they understand what that means. So we started taking an ecosystem approach to inclusive entrepreneurship in that, hey, there's more than one way for you to connect to the startup ecosystem. It's through being an investor. So we have a diverse investor relations task force where we've actively gone out and solicited and tried to build relationships with investors that care about investing in women or inner city or minority investors, so that we have a relationship with them, and then as we get clients, we can make that make that connectivity. We have, through just internally in Jumpstart, looked at our own vendor profiles, like how many of our vendors are actually diverse vendors. So when I'm talking to a chamber or a small business group or a Hispanic chamber, I can say, hey, okay, you already have a business. You may not necessarily be interested in starting a high growth venture-backed business, but you might want to say, well, how does Jumpstart relevant to me? And I could say, you know, we've got budgets, we have dollars, we spend money on marketing, we spend money on facilities. You need to be connected in that way. Or subject matter experts. We do a lot of workshops and events. So we don't want people, when they come to the workshop, seeing a very monolithic group and not feeling, well, like, I can't relate to this, because that is what actually happens. So we make sure that as we're dealing with various professionals or entrepreneurs or funders, that we have bankers, we have micro lenders, we've got, you know, a diverse patent attorneys so that people can see people like them. So we've taken.
And on that note, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I really want to hear from Alice in terms of some of the things from a legal perspective that she sees on a specific level, particularly working with startups here in Silicon Valley.
Well, so of course there's an inherent tension between being an early stage startup, and we only work with early stage startups in our program that have less than $1 million in funding. That's our upper criteria. The truth is most of the startups we work with have less than $20,000 in funding. They're pretty much bootstrapped. So there's an inherent tension in needing legal services and being able to afford them. Lawyers are expensive. And so there are a couple of different things that we see startups do that outside of our program, which is LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and some of the online resources. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with those. They just aren't customizable to a high degree. And so sometimes as the company grows, those templates no longer work. And so we do, some of our projects involve redoing entity formations and contracts and so forth that have come first through Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom or some of those services. We also talk to, we work with a lot of big law firms. A lot of big law firms have deferred compensation arrangements that they offer startups. Again, that's often from, you don't have access to those unless you have a network. And that is one of the things that, you know, we all in the startup world, I think, would tell you, and that I hear. I go out and do research into entrepreneurial ecosystems, and I hear over and over again about how the startup world is collaborative and based on networking. The truth is, though, that's easy to say, but how do you break into those networks, you know? And as I've interviewed accelerators and co-working spaces and incubators around the country, they've all said that their diversity ratios pretty much reflect that in the tech community as a whole, and so they're not great, honestly. And we even find through our program that women and underrepresented minorities that come to our program tend to come to us outside of the accelerator, incubator, co-working space world, that they've heard about us and are applying directly, which I thought was an interesting, it reinforced things that I sort of thought myself but hadn't seen the data on. But we are seeing the data that confirms that now. So having said all of that, I still have to say, and I'm echoing Carmen here in a way, the network is the key thing, and the problem is that the network for women and underrepresented minorities is not as deep and as strong. So you're going to have to try harder but there are people out there, and there are programs like ours that are dedicated to helping people that don't have access in other ways to resources, including legal needs. So I encourage all of you not to give up, but to look for help, because entrepreneurs do like to help. Seasoned entrepreneurs want to help, and it's events like these where you may make some connections that can take you to the next step.
And on that note, too, I just want to, again, kind of go to the audience in terms of what's been the most difficult network for you to break in? Because many entrepreneurs, at least some that I've encountered, even though I work primarily with public companies, they have an expertise that they know and a network that they have, but they need to build that ecosystem. So for somebody what's been the hardest network that you've tried to actually bring into your ecosystem? And maybe some of the panelists can help you address that. Anyone? Yes.
Talking to employers?
Talking to recruiters. Okay. Does anybody have anything on recruiting? Gloria?
So a lot of venture firms have job boards, so where they post the job openings for their portfolio companies. But as I talk to people from the community, they're not familiar with the job board. So the onus has been on us to do a better job of making sure that we're publicizing those. But I don't think people even think to look for job boards. And often too that they have networking. I've seen more over the last year, more networking events that accelerator groups or venture firms have, that where they're bringing in the recruiters that work for those firms to connect to particularly people from diverse communities. So I don't think it's something that's been common historically, but I know it's out there. And we've had our job board for at least 7 years, but a lot of people still don't know that it exists. So this is an opportunity to talk about that.
Anarghya?
Yeah. In addition to that, I always recommend that people look on AngelList.com. A lot of startups, small, medium, and large, even big companies, will post jobs there, and it's really based on transparency. They even post salary ranges, equity ranges if there is equity, job descriptions, and I have referred this to several other friends who have said that they've had a great response rate on there. So when they do indicate interest, people have responded either yes or no. So.
Also, too, JobWell, I know that I saw them listed, but them as well. Yes.
I'm an entrepreneur in the social, in the entrepreneurial space, EdTech, and I find, for us, legal and marketing resources are something that's harder to access. So,
Marketing.
just knowing that we're a nonprofit and finding
Can someone talk a bit about marketing? I know you could definitely talk about legal assistance, but
Marketing, like social media marketing? Yeah.
social media marketing, and we've got this resource that's there, and there are a lot of segments that we target. Gatekeepers, educational, community, for classrooms, and then also with other gatekeepers, parents, growth, letting them know about
For social media marketing, I'll recommend another company that you can use, which is Growth Geeks. I think they even have a free 1-month trial. Not a portfolio company, but I've used them with other companies in the past, and they've seen success in being able to grow their social following and also developing some strategies around that type of growth.
And then through our mentoring program, we do have, and so I would encourage everyone, if you were in the ecosystem that you do work with, is look to see if they have mentor programs, because I know a number of different organizations have mentor programs across the country, but we've got a number of mentors that's what their expertise is on, SaaS marketing or go-to-market strategy or sales execution. So it's just something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, that there are these pools of talent and experienced experts. They just don't necessarily, I think the ecosystem could do a better job of promoting these services. Yeah, I think yes. I think data scientists might be early, so you may not see that reflected in some ecosystems, maybe here in the Bay Area, but that's something that you can ask about.
So just beyond legal services, I think that schools of higher education and maybe even colleges are often run programs that are similar to ours in that they're using students to help the community. So I think that it's worth, and I don't know for sure what Berkeley is doing or San Francisco State or whatever, but I would think it's worth reaching out to business schools, to other areas that you need help in, just to see if you can get some students working for you.
I saw another question over here about networks that were hard to break into. Or was I just seeing things? Or that was you?
So I think the biggest problem is when you have these job boards, that there's inherent bias in the networking system. The model that is used now has a bias to the name, age, gender, and without considering getting those jobs on boards that are available, it's very, unless you have a connection, it's not easy to get it.
So for the audience, there was saying that in these job boards there is an inherent bias, and unless those biases are removed, it's kind of hard to actually get in front of people. I saw you, sir, in the front, you too, and then have the panel speak to both.
Yeah. My question was more around the tech and the music intersection space. Because I currently reside in the Atlanta area, and is huge in the music area, but not so much in the tech area. But I also know that places like New York and San Francisco are huge in the tech area, but not as heavily focused in the music. So I was looking like, how do you break into that intersection?
Okay, Carmen?
In Oakland, there's an amazing accelerator called Zoo Labs. And they started off as a recording studio for Bay Area hip-hop artists, R&B and hip-hop artists, and then realized that a lot of these artists were getting a lot of traction, a lot of publicity, but didn't build businesses that were actually sustainable. So the moment that their career ended, they were broke. And so they were like, oh, okay, how do we actually marry the intersection of the music industry and the business savvy in order to be able to have some wealth when I decided to end my career? And now they are actually working at the intersection of tech and music, which might be of interest.
Anyone have anything else to add to the comment about the bias on the job board?
One of the things we started doing as relates to bias is developing a series of what we call hiring to win in the global marketplace, targeted towards our portfolio companies, where we talk to them about hiring, making the best hiring decisions, but we embed diversity and inclusion in that because there's a lot of data that shows that having diverse teams provide superior financial performance and outcomes. So, educating the companies that are hiring on this type, providing them that type of information, and then allowing them, so while we have the workshops with the entrepreneurs, we have workshops for talent, because what I see a lot of times people doing is pitching themselves to a startup using their corporate resume, but people just don't know. Like, an entrepreneur is looking for something different than a large corporation is. So having workshops that speak to, like, is this even the right type of environment? Do you want to work for a startup? Because there's a certain type of personality that would be excited about that. And then how to sell yourself to that. And what we're doing is then, after each concurrent workshop, allowing opportunities for people to connect right there and build those relationships. And these would be people that probably would never connect or talk to one another, but that's just something that we've started doing, and I think it's because of this whole national conversation about diversity in tech, and I'm starting to read more articles about unconscious bias. I was just reading about a software program, I can't think of the name of it right now, but that tries to kind of screen out for the name, age bias. So I think now people are more aware of this, and I think we'll see more of these types of workshops happening. But I think also the onus is on you, the entrepreneur, to push for these types of things and to not rely on the venture companies or the organizations to do that. So push back.
Anarghya? And then we're coming close to the end, and also, if you can talk about, she mentioned something about growth and continuing to grow your company. If you all can talk about that a little bit in the last couple of minutes that we have on this panel.
I loved what Gloria said about finding a commonality, and one question that I always encourage people to ask each other in a networking session is just like, if you're talking to one person, try to find the one thing you have in common. It may be that you're both allergic to shellfish, it may be that you're both from New York, whatever it is, but I think even finding that small commonality can help. In terms of like being able to get into networks, I strongly recommend trying to find on LinkedIn any connection and trying to see if there's an opportunity to get a warm intro. I found that that's really helpful and makes a really big difference, whether it is for hiring or venture capital money raising, whatever it is. In terms of the music industry, I think a good way to work back, and this also works for other industries, is to go look at really prominent tech companies in that specific industry, so Spotify, SoundCloud, Pandora, look at who their investors are or who has been involved with them, and try to see if you can find a connection to be able to chat with them, to kind of see their strategy around who they met with, how they grew, and what they did there. And growth.
Consumer growth.
So there's a lot of stuff to talk about with regards to consumer. I know in a consumer application or consumer business, user acquisition can really be make or break, and you really need to be able to get that strong user base, active user base. I think that really having a clear strategy on how to do it, I actually tweeted about this a couple days ago, which is like having a clear path to customer acquisition is really important, and there's multiple ways to do it. There's like channel ways. You go through the agency model where there's like one goose who laid the golden egg that can get you a bunch of different things. There's a potential for organic viral growth and having a way for your product to do that. So like, for example, Box did an excellent job where if you have a Box account and you send someone a file in Box, well, they too have to get a Box account to open it. So that virality is really important. And then also using, I've heard people are getting great conversion rates on Facebook marketing and other channels like that, but happy to also chat offline about it.
So we have a few more seconds. Anyone else have anything to say about growth? Anything else that I have 5 minutes? Oh, fantastic. Does anyone have anything to add about, I see a couple of questions, but does anyone else have anything to add about like consumer growth or marketing growth or anything like that, since we have a couple of more minutes, and then I'll want to take a couple more questions in the audience. No, okay, question. Way over there in the corner. Stand up, speak up. Can't see you, so I need you to talk loud.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Harold. I'm a software engineer at Box. My question is around kind of like different types of entrepreneurship. In tech, when we tend to talk about entrepreneurship, we tend to talk about like venture-funded entrepreneurship, where the kind of target is the kind of business that will have massive growth, huge exit, with the holy grail being an IPO or some acquisition. But there's a lot more types of entrepreneurship. There's people who aspire to maybe not have a huge growth company, maybe have a small but sustainable business, right? Like in the tens or 20s of people, but it's profitable and provides some service to the community. Or like the social entrepreneurship, where you want a self-sustaining but non-profit organization, et cetera, et cetera. Is this even possible in tech, these different models? And if so, what resources are available for that kind of, those different entrepreneurship models?
Okay, before we go, I saw another question. Oh, the same question?
Yeah, basically, as someone who's also sort of decided my business is going to be not hockey stick growth, should I or how can I tap into the VC resources or the culture that's here?
Okay. All right, so.
Yeah, I'll just quickly go over, and thank you both for your question. It's something that comes up a lot, and I think the place to start is to really understand what the nature of VC is and which VCs you're going after, because typically most VCs, they have a fiduciary duty to get high returns for their limited partners or their LP base. But the good news is that there's many sources of money, and I think some of them are just like not known. So crowdfunding has been really successful for a lot of different projects, and it doesn't have to be a Kickstarter. It could be Indiegogo, it can be a crowd tilt, many ways to do that. ABLE, so just ABLE, ABLE lending is a great way to get small business loans where you can actually get your friends and family to contribute, and also they bring in their own community to contribute. And a thing I recommend to several entrepreneurs is small business loans from local banks. And a lot of banks right now really do want to lend and grow out that ecosystem, specifically in San Francisco. So there's a lot of opportunity there to be able to build organizations. And finally, the last thing is there are several grants and funds, including social impact investors. The K-Pores over in Oakland are great investors over there doing a lot of social impact investing. Cordis Foundation does social impact funding. So there's a lot of organizations out there who they are excited to invest in you if you're social impact and you're going to build a self-sustaining business model. They don't necessarily, I don't know specifically for those, but not all of them need to see that hockey stick type of growth.
Alice?
So I don't have anything to say about raising capital. That's sort of outside my wheelhouse. But in terms of other resources, in doing the research around entrepreneurial ecosystems in various cities in the country, it's become very apparent that co-working spaces like Galvanize are doing amazing things in terms of supplying resources that otherwise you'd be at an accelerator. And honestly, most accelerators are looking for the kinds of businesses that are going to explode and make the people that run the accelerator program a lot of money. I mean, not necessarily, but a lot of them have that model. But co-working spaces are a place where there are lots of events, there are lots of opportunities for mentorship, there are other people that are at the desk next to you that may turn out to have a technical expertise you need or be able to refer you to someone who has a specialty that you need. So I think that co-working spaces are starting to fill that need a little bit for companies that are not going to have those huge exits that are going to attract big money.
Gloria?
Yeah, I think the one benefit, well, there are many benefits, but one of the benefits about a lot of the conversation about startup and VC is that people have started to talk about entrepreneurship more in general and started to ask the question you're asking, well, what about, providing these types of services and assistance to people that have an interest in growing their business, but maybe not on such a huge scale. And there are more and more programs that are looking at the types of businesses that you're looking for, maybe not VC, but within their economic development space. The SBA just recently awarded 88 accelerator grants for the types of places that Alice was just speaking about. We have one which we're going to be targeting kind of low-income communities, but helping them to grow and maybe create jobs in their community. So I think there's starting to become a kind of a trickle-down effect about entrepreneurship and more curiosity and interest in funding and providing spaces for entrepreneurs of all kinds.
Carmen, did you have? Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the challenges of having a panel that's looking beyond capital or supports for entrepreneurs beyond capital is that I feel like, superficially bounded to not to talk about capital, but I think that there's a whole range of capital types that are available. I think like philanthropy, there are a ton of foundations that are interested in putting grant dollars towards on enterprises. There are places like us that aren't looking for a high return or that are trying to look at things like recoverable grants, starting to sort of lay the groundwork where we can use capital above and beyond the high return that investors want to help incite people to solve some of the complex social problems that we're facing. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but I see the little dismiss sign, so I'm going to pass.
Yep. Okay, so is that my official dismiss sign? Okay, well, I want to thank, I can take it? Thank you, yes.
Okay, so you asked us if we had a question on this a little bit afterwards.
Yep.
But in terms of access to ecosystems, personally, I know it's taken me a year and a half through becoming a Kaufman finalist to being an accelerator to
Yep.
get into a lot of networks. One that I think is very challenging is meeting venture-backed entrepreneurs because by and large, VC say that you need to get introductions through that source, particularly to really get their attention.
Any comments on that? Okay, so yes, one of the difficulties that she was mentioning is getting access to venture-backed entrepreneurs and to be able to actually talk to them about what they've done. Any comment on that? I'll give everybody about a minute, maybe 30 seconds each. So
Yeah,
if I say stop, don't give me that.
So the question you asked is really important. So we believe in the transitive property of amazing, which means that a lot of our amazing deal flow comes from our amazing founders. And that's important for you to meet those folks because then you also get into that VC network. Ways to meet them, we host a lot of events, so happy to connect with you. Please come. And we have some of our venture-backed entrepreneurs who come there, speak, who hang out. It's a great way to meet them. I think another really cool way is a lot of these events such as this will often have founders who come and speak about their successes, their failures.
Sorry, Anarghya.
I'm going to give you my 30 seconds.
No.
I feel like you actually, so for us.
I'm getting the flags. I'm getting the flags.
Oh,
I agree with what.
yeah, no.
Can talk. Yes.
Alice, do you have anything?
No, all I can tell you is that there's a Techstar and I think Y Combinator list all of the startups that have gone through their program. So whether that's of use and contacting them, I'm not sure. But we don't deal with those level of startups, so I don't know personally.
All right, well, as I said, I'm getting the flag. We have to go here. Thank you, everyone, for coming on this panel. Thank you for coming out.